So if it's all the same to everyone, I'm going to be recording my impressions of the currently airing shows from this point forward on probably this couch or wherever I happen to be. And instead of waiting until I've seen all of the shows that are out and then making a video where I sit down and talk about all of them from memory, I'm going to be talking about each show just as I watch it. As soon as I watch an episode or catch up on a show if I'm behind on it, I'll break out the camera and record, and then just every time I have enough clips essentially to make a, we'll say, 20-minute video, because that seems like the length people like these things to be, not too much longer than that. Um, then, yeah, I'll just, every time I reach that amount of time, make another video. That way, you don't have the problem of if I, don't watch, like, let's say I watch 5 out of the 6 new shows, new episodes that I'm supposed to watch, and then never get around to watching the 6th one. It, that video gets pushed back farther and farther, and that's why I fell behind last season. So, this might be a little bit more scattershot. You'll just be hearing about whichever shows I happen to have watched, but since I'll be probably keeping it to 3 or 4, maybe 5 shows of video, I'll put them all in the title. So you'll know exactly what I'm going to be talking about in each of these videos. So, the first show that I'm going to talk about in this one is Assassin's Pride. And this show, I remember watching the trailer and thinking it looked like generic trash. And it is, but it's weirdly good and in really unexpected ways that are more difficult to explain. To a point where I almost think this would be worth doing like an actual analysis video on. Like in stark contrast to doing Ari Ferreira, like showing you how you could do an incredibly generic, dumb light novel adaptation really artfully and just by crafting it well and through audio visual presentation, which is like really the power of adaptation. I would be shocked if anybody who's a fan of whatever the source material of this is was disappointed with this show. I don't know if they've changed anything majorly, but like this is one of those rare examples where you feel like they used the medium of animation to enhance the storytelling, and like that's what the fucking point of doing this should be. So just to explain, I mean, I don't know much about the original. It's listed as a novel on Mal, but it's clearly the same type of content as would be found in a light novel. And it's along the lines of something like Absolute Duo, or particularly Chivalry at Magic High, Chivalry of a Failed Knight. Jesus Christ, I combined that with Irregular at Magic High School. They're all fairly similar. The Asterisk War also kind of falls into this genre of the magic fighting school. A place where a world where there's the existence of some kind of mana, some kind of spiritual force that you can manipulate in unique ways to fight with, and you know, it's a very video gamey kind of storyline. It appeals to people who like grinding and spec sheets, I guess. But these books tend to be about a main character, getting stronger and fighting their way through kind of like tournament setups a lot of the time, particularly in Asterisk War and Chivalry of a Failed Knight. I don't know as much about Absolute Duo because I only watched the first episode of that show. And even that show had like kind of ambitious animation in it where it had like, it had above average Sakuga basically for, comparison to those other shows in the genre. But Assassin's Pride, not only does it have some decent Sakuga in it, granted the fight direction is fucking nonsense, but not in a bad way. Just in the way that, like, everything in this is ridiculously over the top. The main character is just batting away bullets with his sword right from the get-go. Like, a flash of like 6 of the same sword on the screen at the same time, blocking bullets and everything. So like, the action is readable and it's well animated. It's just ridiculous. So like, I can't call it like great choreography in the sense that there's not much tension in the battle scenes. It's the main character's just tearing through everything. But and it looks ridiculous because he's just blocking bullets from all angles but nonetheless, for what it is, it's entertaining enough, and I think it's if I was younger and thought that kind of combat was badass, I think I would have greatly enjoyed it. I just realized that my tripod is just like leaning on the couch. Um, so yeah, the action is fine, and the character designs are like they're very generic. They're almost kind of 2000s ish, and the um, God, the color design is very weird. Like the outfits they wear are the girls in particular are wearing like borderline lingerie. Even the school uniforms are weirdly like clingy fabric where it's like they're wearing like low cut like almost negligee-esque like fabric. Some of them are showing their midriff too, so it's like they're barely wearing anything on top. And then they're wearing like booty shorts, like super short shorts, and then like a little jacket that just kind of covers their arms. So it's like you basically like if not for the jacket, they would just look like they were wearing almost nothing. Like they would look like they were going to the club. But they're just wearing these jackets to make it slightly modest. And this is their school uniform, so like most of the characters are wearing this. I mean, it looks good. It makes the girls look cute, even though like a lot of them have like extremely flat chests. But that's just the way this be, I guess. Um, but yeah, like the uniforms are interesting. The main character is wearing this fucking odd color combination because he's got like mostly dark blues and black, but then like these highlights of really light blue. But he's like it looks kind of vaguely fashionable, but the man's an assassin. Like, the idea of him wearing all this dark blue is that he's meant to blend into the dark, but he has these light blue highlights just to make it, I guess look better to some degree, or just stand out more. But it's still strange. So I couldn't decide how I felt about his design. There was also a girl who was wearing, like, all pink with similar blue highlights and similarly, like, an outfit that had a lot of components but still managed to be skimpy. So, like, I don't know. The designs are interesting. I definitely think they're attractive and on some level, and that they present some fairly interesting outfits. And the reason I'm diving into the fashion sort of so much is that this show I don't think is made for men explicitly. I think that this show is very much trying to have cross-gender appeal. And there have been a number of things like this. We get some of these light novels or manga more often that have like a strong central male and female character. Like think of like Love is War, where like that show it's just as easy of a pitch towards men or women as long as you keep the fan service to like like as long as you make sure that the girls are hot in a way that girls would also be interested in, like cool fashion and like uh you know getting to dress like you're going to the club essentially. Like I don't think the girls wear anything in this that like a girl wouldn't wear necessarily in real life, and they're interesting things that maybe would be fun to draw as well. So like the characters the girl, she like is basically busts her ass super hard trying to become a strong fighter because she's from like a noble family, but she has no latent magical abilities. And like in this world, everybody fights and uses magic. So no matter how good of a physical fighter she is, mana is just like so much more powerful than fighting that even like the weakest mana user can just fucking destroy you if you are a physical user. And it's interesting because just coming at this from a database perspective for me as an otaku autist who thinks about things in this metatextual way, this is a place on the database I don't think I've seen before. And maybe other people have because I don't watch a ton of shit like this. But like, I think of Zero no Tsukaima and how in that show, Louise has no magical ability. She also has no fighting ability, and it's more just like everything she does just goes horribly wrong. And she has a similar kind of pride in her family name and like wanting to become a great magician to make up for the, to make up for her sort of disgrace. Um, but like she doesn't really get better, and at least not early on. As far as I know, she never becomes like a great magician or anything like that. It's more that her relationship with the main character helps her through. But in this show, we explicitly already have the main character has been given magical powers by the main guy. Like he is he is super powerful. Like he nothing has shown up yet that could even remotely pose a threat to him or fuck with him at all. So like if there's going to be an enemy who is strong enough to like keep him at bay, then maybe we'll get to see this girl defend him or something. I have no idea. Defend people. But right now she's not very powerful just because of the nature of this world. In spite of being a good physical fighter, but like she's presented as a very heroic character in a sense that she like really tries very hard, and like I don't know if it was her father or whoever who just has her get the shit kicked out of her every night by like random monsters just as a way of trying to awaken her power. Like they're trying to experiment with seeing if they can make her become a powerful mage by way of beating the shit out of her. And so since she's taking this beating all the time, there's like a certain nobility to the fact that she's trying so hard, which is kind of what inspires Assassin Boy to save her, even though he was apparently supposed to kill her. And he was justifying it to himself by saying that, like, because her life is so miserable, she deserves to die. But like when he sees just how hard she's trying, he's like, all right, I'm going to team up with her. And I guess he's going to justify this by having her be his benefactor on some level so that there'll be like a mutual debt between them, because he unlocked her magic and she's going to sponsor him, I guess. Because I assume he was outbid. This stuff is not explained that thoroughly. What made this episode so interesting is the fact that this plot is treated with like very dramatic presentation where the music is really beautiful and moving and like really gets you into the mood of the scene, and the visuals play against the music. The visuals are orchestrated around like letting you drink in this moment and like cutting close to the characters' faces, showing different changes in expression, showing like certain movements in slow motion or with extra detail to give like emphasis to all the different sensory details of the scene. There's parts where it does like kind of artsy shit with like rose petals and cutting the camera between different like parts of space and time. There's one part where like the main character is the main guy is talking to this dude, and then it like kind of just cuts to, while the guy is still talking, it cuts to him in a different outfit in a different place writing something down, and then it cuts back, and then eventually cuts back again to him writing the stuff down, and it's sort of implied that what he's writing had something to do with the conversation they were having. But then the scene continues from after he's just finished writing to where he's going from there. It's just a really clever way to transition between two different spots in the timeline. And it looks great, and it keeps things exciting and fun. And so the whole way through, you've got these moments where, particularly the one that was like the biggest shock to me was when the girl falls off of the balcony of her place. So our main character, he's been introduced to us as like this incredibly badass fighter. We just see him like killing people on some other mission, basically unrelated to the main plot. And he hangs out with this other hot girl in pink who I guess is part of his assassin team. I wasn't entirely clear. She fucks off, and then he comes to the school and sees the main girl like out on a balcony, and it seems like she had just come out to look at the stars at that particular moment, and he happens to see up her skirt, so she gets embarrassed and tries to cover it but slips and falls off the railing. So we've got slow motion, girl falling off railing, guy running up. And I'm thinking, of course, she's going to fall and her tits are going to land on his face. Or her pussy's going to land on his face. Because if you've seen my video, Anime is Getting Lazy with Its Meta, you know that not only does that happen all the fucking time, but parodies of it happening where it happens even worse than it would have happened all the time. So, I'm expecting that she's going to fall into his face or something, but instead he catches her. Now, him catching her could still be just as much of a sexual moment, and in a way it is, but what the scene unfolds is this, like, really lengthy, intimate moment of him, like, catching her and, like, all these different emotions passing through the both of them, you know, particularly her as, like, she takes in, you know, like, everything that's just happened. And it comes off as, like, this very romantic, slow moment. And, like, when eventually the friends come rushing over to see if she's okay, you realize, like, all of that happened in the span of, like, a split second. So it's like this way of making reality time dilate, essentially, in the narrative. It is just really great directing. And I've never seen directing that ambitious applied to one of these fucking shows. So it was really surprising, and it's like, it's not like I'm going to tell you that this show is amazing. I mean, like, honestly, the directing is on a level above even a lot of, like, shows I would consider good. It was just artful in ways that I haven't really seen done that way before. But the plot is, like, edgy fucking Chunibyo, you know, high school fighting, you know, fan service laden waifu fucking wars bullshit. Like, it is trite as fuck, but it's still entertaining just because they tried. It really, like, I mean, for me, it makes me really think about, like, how many of these shows I probably would have watched if they had just been entertaining this way, you know? And I don't know if it can hold it up for more than an episode, even, you know? But, like, the director is a first-time director of a full show. He's done tons of episode direction of just individual episodes of all kinds of shit. And some of it's stuff like Yamano Susume, you know, shows that are known to have, like, kind of artsy visual design or direction in places. So, you know, I'd be curious to see more of his work. I literally have not watched enough of any of the shows he's worked on to have actually seen his other work. But, you know, I was definitely fascinated. And the studio that's doing it as well is called, let me look at it. They are called, oh, I'm looking at the novel. I'm not looking at the anime. That's why I can't see the studio. I'm on my anime list here. It's called EMT Squared. And EMT Squared has not really done any. They've only done a couple of full productions essentially, and one of them was another odd show, Renai Bokun, which I know there were some people who really got behind, but it's not a particularly well loved show. They also did Seiyaku no Valkyria, which I don't remember even giving a shot to, and they worked on Kumamiko. So, like, they're like a newer studio that's barely done anything really noteworthy. They did a couple of shorts that maybe some people have seen, but, like, yeah. Otherwise, I could not have seen this coming. There's no way I would have thought that a show like this would be stylized the way that it was, that the staff of people I don't know anything about would be trying to do something interesting with this show. I really hope they keep it up. I almost feel like I could go through this first episode the way I did with Ari Ferreira, just to come away with the opposite conclusion. Like, just to be like, oh, this is how you do generic dumb bullshit, and make me feel like, wow, the anime was worth watching. Even if I might not even watch the whole show just because the plot is stupid, you know, and I don't even know if the novels are good. But we'll see what happens. So, No Gun's Life, the way of life of a man loading a magazine, was yet another very pleasant surprise. This is one of the shows I had higher hopes for because it's a Madhouse show from some of the same leading staff that worked on Black Lagoon. It has a guy with a gun for a head as the main character. It looked like some sort of a action detective story. And that's exactly what it is. But it was just so much better than I expected just by virtue of being so good. The first of all, artwork is really beautiful in this show. And even though there's not a ton of animation per se, it just is. It's very sleek. It's very modern in that it uses a lot of modern techniques while also at its core just being about really like great shading on really tight character art with beautiful designs. The eyes of characters are really captivating in this show. There's a lot of personality put into their faces, and then of course there's the unique designs of things like a guy with a head for a gun for a head rather. I guess either way you slice it. Um, so the show just looks nice. It's very hard boiled. There's interesting use of backgrounds and colors and digital effects. I thought it all coalesced really well. Even the CG, when it came up, was in moments where it made sense to use it and it wasn't jarring or weird to look at. So, yeah, like visually, the whole thing was very cohesive. Again, not a ton of outright animation, but everything you see looks nice. And, I mean, most of what you're seeing is characters sort of having dialogue together. And this is something I was really worried about from the trailers because it seemed like that would probably be the case. Like it would be a lot of characters standing around talking. And historically, there have been Madhouse shows that have had like really strong emphasis on character art and shading and like characters just kind of standing around talking. And you get stuff like Devil May Cry where the dialogue is just fucking nonsense and terrible, and the show is bad. And so there's been good, there's been bad, there's been all types from Madhouse. And there's also been a lot of shows with just weaker directing, particularly in the last decade, since Madhouse has not been the same studio it was before the 2010s, since the 2010s. It used to be led by Masao Maruyama. He was the main producer of most of their shows. There was a very strong sense of identity with the shows that they made. And even though Maruyama left and went and made other studios, and a lot of creative staff from Madhouse have just kind of shown up wherever, there are still people who have worked at the studio many times who continue to work there, and so there have still been shows coming out of this era that feel like older Madhouse. If you look at something like the works of Morio Osaka, that are that harken back to the same work he was doing as far back as the 90s, but this particular show, it harkens back to like the mid 2000s Madhouse, not just that made like Black Lagoon, but but made some of those other like edgier, darker, more action driven shows. It's not artsy in the way that like a Casshern Sins is, but the art is consistently great. And even though a lot of it is characters standing around and having conversations, they're in interesting locations, it looks good, and most importantly, the dialogue is great. And I don't get to say that all the time when I'm talking about anime. Like the last show I talked about, I may have praised the directing and the use of music and editing, but I couldn't have praised the dialogue in particular. But in this show, the dialogue always has this sort of combative quality to it where any of the conversations that Gunhead Detective Man gets into, he's sort of pressuring the person he's talking to into revealing more information, and he's sort of hounding them and like really communicating like a detective to try to advance the conversation into a place where he's at an advantage over the person or has something to gain from the information wise. So you're always learning new things, and a lot of it helps to build the world. A lot of it helps to build the characters. Some of the interactions are interesting in and of themselves or sound cool. Obviously the detective guy is a fun and easy to like character. And there's also the fact that the show kind of takes the piss out of itself here and there, so it doesn't ever come off too stern and serious. The fact that the main character's head is a gun is important, not only like in a storytelling sense and to his character's history, because the show is set in a world in which people have modifications done to their body to enhance them or transform them, and he has clearly gone through this at some point in his life. And so there's like character elements connected to the gun thing, but there's also the use of the design is really creative because he does kind of take advantage of the fact that his head is a gun in the way he addresses people. There's also disadvantages in that people are just naturally afraid of him a lot of the time. And he, he has to, he has it like played with for laughs, where sometimes the fact that his head is a gun, could be the butt of a joke, but it can also allow for moments that wouldn't work if his head wasn't a gun. For instance, there's a scene in which a girl kisses him on the cheek, and he gets like really flustered, and his face kind of simplifies and blushes, and it's a really goofy moment because the gun-headed man is kind of trying to insist that he's like a badass who's like sort of above being I don't know, intimate with a girl such as this one who is with him is like super beautiful. But when she kisses him on the face as like a tease, it makes him like blush super hard. So it's like he's just this total softy, this like almost like virginal character in spite of the fact that he's a headgun older man, we won't even say virginal, but at least innocent. And so that contrasting with the just look of his appearance is funny in and of itself. And these kind of jokes don't really take away from the tone of the show. They feel at home in there and add that levity to it when most of the interaction is more intense or more focused on the plot. And then you also have like awesome villain hot chicks. The use of color in the hair of that red haired girl is really cool. I like her character design and her outfit and everything. And there's some, and she has a cool weapon. She has a gun that fires 3 bullets at a time, and it has this really unique design. And like these are the kind of details that really make an action show come to life. It's like having memorable characters with memorable aesthetics and memorable weapons and memorable dialogue. And so it doesn't matter as much that there's not like crazy action scenes because it's all the component parts are interesting or noteworthy or memorable in their own right. Going forward from there, the plot evolves in a surprisingly emotional way and leaves us with like a huge. Basically, the central storyline is going to be about taking down a mega corporation. So there's a strong feeling of cyberpunk to the whole thing, in that everybody has these body enhancements, and they kind of live in just the. It's not really presented as like a low standard of living on the ground floor of the city or anything like that. But this mega powerful corporation that basically created the technology by which everybody gets modified is basically violating human rights and creating these concentration camps and stuff, or disguised as like religious institutions of orphanages. Like the main character is an orphan who gets picked up by this so-called orphanage run by so-called nuns, but the reality is that he's being tested on by the corporation and modified in all these weird and crazy ways, and like he's being made to control these like remote puppets, and so he has saved this kid from the from that place, but his puppet has died in the process. And so our gunman has now this central goal of trying to find this guy's actual body, because it would prove that this corporation needed to be stopped and that they were evil, essentially. So it's like it's a huge job that now has been thrust on his desk to have this responsibility to uncovering this massive thing. And is he a bad enough dude to get it done? That's what the question is going to be on our minds as we go forward. So yeah, I thought it was like a surprisingly engaging plot with pretty well written characters, great dialogue scenes, great artwork, flashier and more modern even than the stuff that Madhouse was doing in the 2000s. Like, if we get to see some crazy Sakuga in this on top of everything else, then this could cross into like that Kashern Sin's realm of like unbelievably good looking anime that you can't believe is real. But even for what it is, it looks good enough for having dialogue that can also carry itself, which again is rare in any of these shows from any era. So yeah, I would say pretty excited about it. Hope it stays good, and I'm surprised that this season is turning out better than I would have thought. That's why I don't trust the trailers or any of the other information. I just watch the show when it comes out, and yeah, some of it's fucking good. Okay, so Hoshiai no Sora. I'm pretty sure this is the one that when we did the seasonal chart, I pointed out that this guy was an interesting director. If I'm not mistaken, the guy who directed Ocean Waves for Studio Ghibli, their TV movie from the early 90s. He directed the first season of Ranma One Half, which is the best part of Ranma One Half, and a lot of other interesting shit all throughout the 90s and 2000s. Some of it's not that good. Some of it has even been, like his most recent show, Battery, which was another sports show, got pretty lowly scored overall. I only watched the first episode and don't remember liking it very much. However, the first episode of Hoshiai no Sora was fantastic. And I, had seen that it was going to be a tennis show, and I remember my reaction being like, I sure hope there's more to it than just a tennis show. And there is a lot more to it than that. So, the conceit of the show essentially is that there is this high school boys tennis club comprised pretty much entirely of second year students because their team fucking sucks. They have not won a single game in 4 years. Most of the team has no idea what they're doing and doesn't honestly really care that much. They don't really have that much fight in them because they've sucked for so long. Most of them came into the club at a point when it sucked, were left with it sucking, and nobody new wants to join, even though they do have a decent number of members. But because they suck so bad and the school is trying to cut down on how many clubs it has, they're just like, if you guys can't get your shit together, we're basically going to can you. But there is one guy in the club who, while not necessarily amazing, is halfway decent. But he, is not good enough to carry the team or anything like that. But he's very serious about tennis, and he seems to have a decent amount of money. And he just really wants to be, I don't know if he wants to be a professional tennis player. I don't know if he just wants to keep the club going because his older brother was formerly in the club, and I don't know if the club was good when his brother was in, and maybe that was before they went to shit when he joined. I don't really know exactly what his motivation is, but he really wants to keep the club and be able to keep playing. And so, there also is sort of mysteriously midway through the episode the presentation of this idea that his mom does not want to be around him at all and is kind of a weird, freaky, psycho bitch. Seems to have a good relationship with the older brother and be a normal housewife for the most part, but does not want shit to do with the younger brother for some reason. She's like freaked out by him, and it's not clear why. So that's a weird little thing that happens in the middle of the episode and starts to let you know that there's going to be more going on here than just this tennis drama going on at school. So the kid, he's so determined. There's a transfer student who comes into the school, and it's somebody who he happened to know from before this kid had like moved away, I guess, and come back. And he knows this kid is athletic, and he wants him to join the tennis team because he's convinced that if he teaches him how to play, he'll be able to save the team. And the kid's like, well, I can't do that because I have a single mom, and we moved out here, and he's doing all the chores and helping out around the house while his mom works, and she's an architect who's just like doing like second string production. She's very young, so the kid is so determined to get him to join the team that he's like, I'll help you out with the chores. I'll do anything. I'll fucking pay you, And the kid, the kid literally tells him, like, you have to pay me. Like, that's the only way I'll do it is if you're willing to literally pay me money to play with you. And he agrees to do that because he's so fucking determined. It's a big, stirring, emotional scene, this, like, combative dialogue that keeps progressing where you're not sure how each character's going to respond and, where the lines will be drawn between them. But, it escalates to that point, and it's kind of like the episode is ending at this point. We've spent a lot of time on setting up these characters and their emotions leading to this moment, building little pieces of their backstory. But there's more to the episode because we follow the kid, the transfer student, home, and as he's just sort of, hanging out, his dad comes home. So the dad, who is, not supposed to be around because the mom and dad are split, just comes, basically forces his way into the house by tricking him into opening the door, and then just beats the shit out of him and goes looking for, like, he's like trying to find money that they might have hidden around the house. So he's like opening up the fucking air conditioner to pull out the money that he knows the kid would have hidden there, and just beats the fuck out of him and leaves him cowering in the corner and fucks off. So yeah, this show had some of the darkest and most like sudden and shocking depictions of child abuse I've seen in an anime that didn't feel like it didn't feel forced or ridiculous in the way that, like, I always thought scenes from Erased and stuff like that, where, you know, they've dramatized it with all the red imagery and the edgy face of the mother screaming as she beats her daughter and just acts like over the top. This guy is just a cold fucking psychopath. You know, he's a very like realistic feeling depiction of just a scumbag who uses people for money, you know, and like we don't know how he got this way, if he's always been this much of a monster, you know, like how long had he been abused? How long have they been away from this guy? But you know, he just storms through and does not give a fuck at all. So it's fucking brutal, and it's, you know, it's an uncomfortable scene, and it's well directed. It happens in just like broad daylight, a normal looking scene, but you know they cut the music out, and the rest of the music in the show is really fantastic. It's got this like a often math rock soundtrack, which is really interesting. All kinds of great tracks all throughout, you know, highlighting good emotional scenes. Very expressive facial expressions in this show. Everybody is showing a lot of emotion. There's a lot of movement. You know, it's not like crazy animation, but things are animated a lot, and it's fun to watch. So, like, overall, the production is really good, but, like, just getting into this particular scene with no music and just displaying it in such a, you know, such a stark kind of way was just like, shit, that happened, you know? So, yeah, I'm extremely interested to know where the fuck this is going, because there's tons we don't even know yet about the motivations of the characters or the people around them, you know, and lots of things that obviously are going to have to be overcome for these characters. So that's a good show. This is a good season all of a sudden. I thought the season was going to suck because nothing looked interesting on the surface, but you know, when you give it all a chance, sometimes miracles happen. Anyways, that's definitely it for this first episode of me going through the shows on the couch instead of the normal way. Become a patron so I can do this all the time and talk about all the shows and let you know what's good, because sometimes good shit comes out of nowhere. And also, go listen to my light novel. I wrote a light novel. It's good. People say it's good. All the comments are positive. People are happy with it. Should go listen to it. I'm going to make another chapter. It's only an hour long, so, you know, won't take up all your time. See you in the next one.